actually. That is Carl. But, you know, Carl, ironically,
Wiese.
yeah, Carl and I have been on the stump. Where is Carl? Anyways, he must be in the other. Okay, is this not true? We have been on the stump so many times. I swear to you, we have said, next time you do mine and I'll do yours. You know, I just want to see how that would work.
It's Wiese Weimer.
Yeah, it's close. It allows you to use the old joke about the chauffeur. Remember that? No, that joke, that's a classic. And I'll take up all the time that I have by telling jokes. You know, the chauffeur goes with the professor to lecture, you know, dozen times or so, getting bored with hearing it. Finally tells the professor that said, you know, that is so boring, I could do that speech. So he said, great, why don't you do it next time? He gets up, gives the speech. Somebody raises their hand, they ask a question, and he goes, you know, that is such a dumb question, even my chauffeur can answer it. Surely you can remember that one. So, all right, well, listen, I think a lot of what I was going to cover, I'll be able to cover very quickly because they've both highlighted these points. So I think it'll be easy for me. I'll catch you up on time. You know, cue me when you need to. Here's what I'm going to try to talk to you a little bit about. I want to talk a little bit about assumptions. I know there are a few people who like to tweet and stuff like that about these things, so my media people write me back and go, careful what you're saying. People are tweeting about it, but I'm not going to say this stuff if I don't mean it, you know, honestly, so I don't really care. What our goal is, I want to talk a little bit about quality management systems. We touched on those this morning, and safety management, and just a little look ahead. So these are assumptions that I have. I sat there this morning at 5 o'clock trying to figure out how to put together my slides on what did I want to say. And I, you know, you can take issue with these if you want to, but, you know, I'm thinking pipelines are going to be needed for the foreseeable future. You know, I mean, honestly, as I've been out and I've talked to the trust and the board, and I said, nobody would like to transition away from a hydrocarbon economy more than me, but I don't see that happening anytime real soon. So until it happens, and I think it'll be a great day, you know, when we have a sea state change and that happens. But until then, we're going to need pipelines to move energy around. It's private infrastructure serving public purposes for a profit. I touched on that this morning. You know, I'm not being cynical here. It's just, I think it's a fact. I believe in my heart of hearts that no pipeline operator wants to have an accident, honestly. Some are willing to take more risk than others or are more underinformed than others, but no operator wants to have an accident. This one I really believe in my heart of hearts. Only the pipeline operator is responsible for safely operating that system. It's that simple. You know, I'm not going to, the regulator can try to influence their performance. Alan is doing a presentation this afternoon. My view on inspections, for what it's worth, we don't have the resources to do more. Randy touched on this morning, more than sample what they're doing in a slice in time. Okay, so maybe catch them on a good day, maybe catch them on a bad day. You know, how do you know what that means? You have to use the data to try to aggregate for performance, but in the end, the operator is responsible for safe operation of that system. We are clearly, and I wish the day would come when we were omniscient, omnipresent, and clearly omnipotent, but that's not going to happen. So until it is, I think that whole system of relying on the regulator to make it safe isn't going to happen. We can help, and we will, and our people are dedicated to that. So I don't doubt our dedication to do it. It's about the resources and the complexity and magnitude of the job. I don't think our resources are likely to expand. If this fiscal cliff, if we step off the edge of that, or if Hans trips over his plate over here, and things can happen. And the last thing, and I touched on this morning, getting change on what you're calling the enforceable standards is glacial at best. Okay, so those assumptions in. Clearly, I'm glad to hear, and actually it's only been in the past year or two that the industry has embraced zero as a goal. I think that's a crucial, as Andy said, mindset change. You know, and I applaud them for it. You know, you're absolutely right. It is very hard to attain perfection. But as somebody else said, it was Vince Lombardi, said, you know, en route there you can achieve excellence. You know, but if you shoot lower, what are you asking for? So The other thing we get caught up in from time to time, and particularly after storms like Sandy go through, or various threats that are out there, those there's a number of us here who have to go through those classified settings. Safe, clean, reliable, secure energy supply is crucial in the country. I like to see pipeline operators incentivized to perform well. So that means to me if it takes a slightly higher rate for them to be able to have the funding necessary to do the right thing, I'm all for it. I'll be glad to pay a few more pennies at the tank just to make sure that happens, or a few more pennies on my gas bill to make sure it happens. This category, and I saw that offshore when I used to do offshore safety, what I call the gleaners. After the people who really know what they're doing and really just can't make money on a system, it gets dealt off to somebody else. They're called the gleaners. They have thinner margins, are willing to take more risk, and I will always be afraid in that situation. I really prefer, it's like the early entrance and then the last out. That's the risk they really worry about. The people in the middle, have their issues. I'm not saying they don't, but those two tails of the curve worry me. The other thing is that I trying to establish a regulatory structure. We've talked about prescription. We've talked about performance, and I think Andy touched on that too. I agree entirely. You can't have one or the other. It really does take both. There's a natural, normal curve out there with pipeline operators, just like there is in any population. Some are really good, and they really know what they're doing, and there's others out there who really don't. And we really need to spend our regulatory resources focusing on them, but we also have to have that minimum floor in the regulatory code for those kinds of operators. The smart ones are not seeking to perform down here. They're seeking to perform up there. It makes them money. It controls risk. It reduces loss. It keeps their runtime up. All of those things. So I would just tell you that, and when you see, I think Alan mentioned this morning, we're dealing with pipeline operations from Alaska to Florida, offshore, onshore, in mountains, in snow, Vermont, in the deserts. It's extremely varied, made up of materials installed over many decades. The system is complex and a lot of variables, so you have to have a little bit of flexibility in your regulatory structure to do that. And then I would just say, and Randy was touching on that too, we try to deploy our limited regulatory resources to maximum advantage. I think the best way we can do that is through data, and we need to provide the public the information they need. It's that simple. We can't get to every nuance. Actually, we don't have every nuance as a regulator. So, a little look back, and I came into, you were talking about June 10th, 99. I came in January of 99, just into OPS. I was interested in what they were doing in risk management demonstration program. And some of the people, I know there's a few people in the room who we worked together on risk management demonstration. And we were doing, I thought, interesting stuff, But then Bellingham happened. It was a sea state change in everybody's mindset, as it should have been. And we took that into building, we moved fast, had to take it into integrity management. Those were lessons from risk management. We came out and said, you can't get rid of, at one point in time, I don't know if you recall this, at one point in time it was, hey, we can get rid of the code if you really know how to do risk management. And you can just operate on a risk management regime. Well, that's not going to work. It clearly has been shown that that's not going to work. So we have to have a mix of both of these. I will, although I don't think it's probably what Larry meant, I would say that IMP is a move towards safety management systems, and it has many of the elements in it. And I'll try to show you that in just a second. Regulations, for those of you, I talked about the regulatory process this morning, and by the way, my Jeannie Layson, who is our intergovernmental person, reminded me that we have posted on the PHMSA website a flow chart of the regulatory process. If you really ever want to torture yourself, you can't get to sleep or something, look at it. It is arcane, but it requires a ton of negotiation. You never get exactly what you want as a regulator. You propose a rule, and there are a ton of reasons and back and forth from all parties. By the way, all sides are negotiating for outcomes, and it is like legislation and everything else. It's sausage. You would like to do better. You'd like to be able to say, this is what you need to do. Do it. but it's not like that. You have to move through the regulatory process. So I'll just tell you, it's a negotiated outcome. I think IMP has been implemented well by some operators and not so well by others. We've written a lot of enforcement cases about integrity management. I think, again, people are constrained by funding, and they did what they could. I do believe our system is infinitely improved. There have been tens of thousands of defects removed from the system. Some of those were serious defects and needed to get out of the system right now. Some of them were smaller, but surely in time some of those would have grown to be problems. So I think that's a good thing, and we should take stock of that, take credit for it. That was a lot of low-hanging fruit, but I think there is a lot, as both of our prior speakers said, that need to be done. I want to just talk for a moment about quality management systems, safety management systems, whatever you want. It's a systematic way of managing for a particular outcome. And I've been surprised to see that several of the larger groups in the audience have been doing what we were doing inside, was trying to compare all the standards that are out there. Process safety management is but one of dozens of these. And the funny thing is, after you've done the comparative analysis, 80 to 90% of the elements of them are the same. It is really surprising. And so I don't know. I think we could sit down in a room, as I said to a couple people, in one day, and we can knock out the framework for a safety management system. I'm firmly convinced of that. They're really broken down into things like this. I won't cover these, but there are lots of integrity management that's in here. Some things in IMP worked well and some didn't. The QA/QC is something I think we really need to get on. We saw that in new construction for sure. Integrating contractors into the workforce, ensuring they're held to the same standard, they have the same qualification. We're all measuring their performance and selecting them based on that. There's a ton of opportunity in these things to improve IMP 2.0. I wanted to make sure that I reiterated for you that next fall, I think Alan and others have touched on this too, we intend to hold a multi-day workshop on integrity management. What we've been doing for the past year is staging a series of events between then and next fall, so that when we get to fall, we've covered a lot of these topics. The data workshop was one. That's a good example. Risk assessment workshop, which we had done last fall. So we will continue to do that, and I'm open to the idea. I mean, if there are things here you think need to be worked more, tell us. We'll be glad to host those things. Mark Rosekind was talking about performance measures and meaningful metrics, and honestly, that's had a lot of us scratching our head. I think I have a better feel for what Mark is talking about. And I do understand that within a management system, you have your objectives, you manage your progress towards it, and you act against that. And I think that's really what he's saying. Mark is going to help open up our data workshop in January, so we'll webcast that for those of you who can't make it. So just a quick look ahead. The things that I've been involved in developing a few standards myself, and have sat on consensus standard committees. And help build the one that's in place offshore now. One of the first things they always start with, and I do believe in the power of leadership, so I'll tell you that explicit, meaningful statements of management commitment, are essential. The company needs to tell its employees what its priorities and its values are, and what they expect the employees to live by, to be part of that company. I think many do. In some cases we need to draw it up front, make it explicit. This is what we want you to achieve. The other thing was the stakeholder engagement, which really has picked up a lot in the past couple of years. It's a silver lining on some otherwise very tragic events. And I think you might as well mine the silver when you can. Then some of these underpinnings, again, I said we've talked about some of these. I do believe that the operators did a good job as a general rule in IMP 1.0, but the knowledge of our systems are incomplete. We've seen that with records, right? Inadequacies, gross inadequacies in some people's records. That is fundamental to risk management, is understanding your system. If you don't understand your system, how can you possibly begin to manage risk? Knowledge of the surrounding environment. We've seen multiple events over the past year where an operator is picking the pipeline. They're looking for defects. They're not finding actionable ones. There might have been defects, but then there's land movement. subsidence or land movement down a hill. It was the interaction of those threats that popped those. And no operator really, when they were just looking for that one defect, was going to see that. Integrating the knowledge of your environment in with the knowledge of your system and looking for interactive threats will really help mine some things. So that's the rigorous risk assessment. And I think one thing we found from distribution integrity management, although I believe we've seen it elsewhere, is that operators aren't looking for potential threats as much. They look for what they know and what they've experienced. Not saying all, mind you, there is a normal distribution, but I think by and large operators look for what they know. They don't look for the possibility, could that be happening here? Could that be? And so I think that is a next wave. I don't know that it was necessarily going to happen in 1.0. Forward leaning on prevention and mitigation, again, I think rates can do a lot to incentivize that. So I covered some of this already, the contractor quality assurance and control. The other thing that I know that was mentioned, Don, I think mentioned earlier, the peer-to-peer reviews. I think that's a really positive step in the right direction. There are other approaches to that same sort of thing, and the nuclear world uses a standard that's available and credible standard, and they have a third party that the companies retain who's outside, who come in and audit them. The thing with management systems that I'll tell you, they mean nothing if they're not in place. You can build it, you can document it, you can draw it, and you can flow chart it, but if your people aren't following it, or if they don't know it and don't understand it, it means nothing. So it's almost a waste of paper. So the value of those peer-to-peer or the independent third party, we provide a different kind of check on the system, but it's immeasurable to the company to know, yes, this is a system we built and the people we have know it and they're actually operating under it. Plus they're feeding their information back. I forget who mentioned that earlier. It's essential to get that frontline information. Those are the people who are actually hands-on, know this stuff. So I think I'm getting to the effectiveness evaluations is really more just looking about, is that system, once it's in place and you're sure it's there, is it producing the results you want? What are you learning out of failure investigations? How do you modify, manage the changes in that, and just get better? As Andy said, it's not over. It never ends. And if you think it's going to end and you're going to be done after a wave, you're crazy. You're not have the right mindset. This is something you're going to keep doing ad infinitum, and that's okay. Maybe your costs will go down in time as you get on top of some of these things. And maybe that's really the way we talk about things like learning culture and safety culture. It's a commitment to trying to be better, shoot towards that goal. And the business about sharing and exchanging information. We're still at, I think, an early phase on that. And particularly as a regulator, we're not invited into a lot of places very willingly. I ask constantly when I see a meeting happening and we're talking about data, hey, would you mind if we sat in? And say, maybe not, maybe not. So I don't know. I think we've got room to grow in that area about exchanging, but I think we have made good progress. And I think that's it. Coming next fall to a workshop near you. Okay, thank you.